Chapter 11 of The Danger Trail. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Roger Moline. The Danger Trail by James Oliver Curwood. Chapter 11. The House of the Red Death. Halfway down the ridge a low word from Croisset stopped the engineer. Jean had toggled his team with a stout length of babiche on the mountain top, and he was looking back when Howland turned toward him. The sharp edge of that part of the mountain from which they were descending stood out in a clear-cut line against the sky, and on this edge the 6 dogs of the team sat squat on their haunches, silent and motionless, like strangely carved gargoyles placed there to guard the limitless plains below. Howland took the pipe from his mouth as he watched the staring interest of Croisset. From the man he looked up again at the dogs. There was something in their sphinx-like attitude, in the moveless reaching of their muzzles out into the wonderful starlit mystery of the still night, that filled him with an indefinable sense of awe. Then there came to his ears the sound that had stopped Croisset, a low, moaning whine which seemed to have neither beginning nor end, but which was borne in on his senses as though it were a part of the soft movement of the air he breathed. A note of infinite sadness which held him startled and without movement, as it held Jean Croisset. And just as he thought that the thing had died away, the wailing came again, rising higher and higher, until at last there rose over him a single long howl that chilled the blood to his very marrow. It was like the wolf howl of that first night he had looked on the wilderness, and yet unlike it. In the first it had been the cry of the savage, of hunger, of the unending desolation of life that had thrilled him. In this it was death. He stood shivering as Croisset came down to him, his thin face shining white in the starlight. There was no other sound save the excited beating of life in their own bodies when Jean spoke. "M'sieur, our dogs howl like that only when some one is dead or about to die," he whispered. "It was Woonga who gave the cry. He has lived for 11 years, and I have never known him to fail." There was an uneasy gleam in his eyes. "I must tie your hands, M'sieur." "But I have given you my word, Jean." "Your hands, M'sieur. There is already death below us in the plain, or it is to come very soon. I must tie your hands." Howland thrust his wrists behind him, and about them Jean twisted a thong of babiche. "I believe I understand," he spoke softly, listening again for the chilling wail from the mountain top. "You are afraid that I will kill you." "It is a warning, M'sieur. You might try. But I should probably kill you. As it is," he shrugged his shoulders as he led the way down the ridge, "as it is, there is small chance of Jean Croisset answering the call." "May those saints of yours preserve me, Jean, but this is all very cheerful," grunted Howland, half laughing in spite of himself. "Now that I'm tied up again, who the devil is there to die but me?" "That is a hard question, M'sieur," replied the half-breed with grim seriousness. "Perhaps it is your turn. I half believe that it is." Scarcely were the words out of his mouth when there came again the moaning howl from the top of the ridge. "You're getting on my nerves, Jean, you and that accursed dog." "Silence, M'sieur." Out of the grim loneliness at the foot of the mountain there loomed a shadow which at first Howland took to be a huge mass of rock. A few steps farther and he saw that it was a building. Croisset gripped him firmly by the arm. "Stay here," he commanded. "I will return soon." For a quarter of an hour Howland waited. Twice in that interval the dog howled above him. He was glad when Croisset appeared out of the gloom. "It is as I thought, M'sieur. There is death down here. Come with me." The shadow of the big building shrouded them as they approached. Howland could make out that it was built of massive logs and that there seemed to be neither door nor window on their side. And yet, when Jean hesitated for an instant before a blotch of gloom that was deeper than the others, he knew that they had come to an entrance. Croisset advanced softly, sniffing the air suspiciously with his thin nostrils, and listening, with Howland so close to him that their shoulders touched. From the top of the mountain there came again the mournful death song of old Woonga, and Jean shivered. Howland stared into the blotch of gloom, and still staring he followed Croisset, entered, and disappeared in it. About them was the stillness and the damp smell of desertion. There was no visible sign of life, no breathing, no movement but their own, and yet Howland could feel the half-breed's hand clutch him nervously by the arm as they went step by step into the black and silent mystery of the place. Soon there came a fumbling of Croisset's hand at a latch, and they passed through a second door. Then Jean struck a match. Half a dozen steps away was a table, and on the table a lamp. Croisset lighted it, and with a quiet laugh faced the engineer. They were in a low, dungeon-like chamber, without a window and with but the one door through which they had entered. The table, 2 chairs, a stove, and a bunk built against one of the log walls were all that Howland could see. But it was not the barrenness of what he imagined was to be his new prison that held his eyes in staring inquiry on Croisset. It was the look in his companion's face, the yellow pallor of fear, a horror that had taken possession of it. The half-breed closed and bolted the door, and then sat down beside the table, his thin face peering up through the sickly lamp-glow at the engineer. "Monsieur, it would be hard for you to guess where you are." Howland waited. "If you had lived in this country long, monsieur, you would have heard of La Maison de Mort Rouge, the House of the Red Death, as you would call it. That is where we are, in the dungeon room. It is a Hudson Bay post, abandoned almost since I can remember. When I was a child the smallpox plague came this way and killed all the people. 19 years ago the red plague came again, and not one lived through it in this Poste de Mort Rouge. Since then it has been left to the weasels and the owls. It is shunned by every living soul between the Athabasca and the bay. That is why you are safe here." "Ye gods!" breathed Howland. "Is there anything more, Croisset? Safe from what, man? Safe from what?" "From those who wish to kill you, monsieur. You would not go into the south, so La Belle Mélisse has compelled you to go into the north. Comprenez-vous?" For a moment Howland sat as if stunned. "Do you understand, monsieur?" persisted Croisset, smiling. I think I do," replied Howland tensely. "You mean Mélisse—" Jean took the words from him. "I mean that you would have died last night, monsieur, had it not been for Mélisse. You escaped from the coyote, but you would not have escaped from the other. That is all I can tell you. But you will be safe here. Those who seek your life will soon believe that you are dead, and then we will let you go back. Is that not a kind fate for one who deserves to be cut into bits and fed to the ravens?" "You will tell me nothing more, Jean?" the engineer asked. "Nothing, except that while I would like to kill you, I have sympathy for you. That, perhaps, is because I once lived in the South. For 6 years I was with the company in Montreal, where I went to school." He rose to his feet, tying the flap of his caribou skin coat about his throat. Then he unbolted and opened the door. faintly there came to them, as if from a great distance,